So we made our stock, and now we're going to go ahead and go over the basics of making a soup with the stock and making the soup as flavorful as possible. And since you've had your stock probably in the fridge for a few days, you might have noticed that there's like a white layer of fat that's collected on the top of it. If there is, feel free to go ahead and skim that off before you use the stock. So this is our chicken stock that we made in the last lesson. So in addition to using this, the other way we're going to really bump up the flavor in our soup is by making something that's called a mirepoix. And basically all that is it is a mixture of finely diced celery, carrots, and onions. And if you have a food processor, feel free to put this stuff in the food processor and crunch it down. You want it to be really small, about the size of those little reconstituted onions that you find on a fast food hamburger. And what you're going to do is you're going to cook this mixture in oil or butter if you want at a really low temperature for about 15 minutes, because you want to really soften this up and bring out all the flavors. So you don't want to saute it or caramelize it. You want a real slow, low cook for this. And when it's all done, you're going to end up with this kind of soft, mushy mixture. So this isn't the vegetable of your soup. This is the flavor booster for your soup. And so all of those flavors combined with the stock that we made yesterday will give your soup a really rich flavor to it. So I'm just going to put that already cooked mirepoix in the bowl. From this point on, whatever you want to do with your soup is that's your opportunity to experiment and play a little bit. So again, soup's a really great way to use up leftovers. So if you have some leftover stuff from previous dinners that you want to use up, this is the way to do it. So there's three kind of building blocks to your soup. And one of the building blocks is some kind of perhaps grain. You could put in barley, you could put in rice, you could put in peas or lentils. If you used dried grains, dried peas, dried rice, then you just need to remember that it's going to take a lot of liquid to reconstitute this stuff. So whatever stock you've put in the pot, these dried ingredients are probably going to use it up, which is okay because, you know, that's part of the soup. But you will have to keep an eye on the soup and keep adding liquid to keep it from turning into some kind of glue. So the other option too is, if you don't want to start with dried ingredients, is if you have some leftover rice, if you have some cooked pasta that you haven't put sauce on. So this is a good way to use up that little bit, and you can just drop that in the soup as well. The other thing that you could put in here if you want is you could put in beans. Dried beans take an awful lot of time and an awful lot of liquid to reconstitute. So if you want to cook them ahead of time, you can, or you can just go ahead and use canned beans. You can use canned garbanzos. It's really fast, it's really easy, and the only thing is you want to make sure that you drain these beans and rinse them off, because you don't want the liquid that's in the can with them in your soup. And as a side note, apparently you can use the liquid from garbanzo beans as an egg substitute. So it's aquafina. No, it's not aquafina. It's something. But anyway, you can Google it. Maybe a different lesson. So anyway, canned beans, canned garbanzos, that's much easier than trying to cook with dried beans in a soup. Then the next thing is if you have some kind of meat. So again, if you've got a little bit of leftover meat, you can dice it up and you can add it to your soup. This is a little bit of leftover chicken that I have that I'm going to throw in there. If you want to use raw meat, that's fine, but just make sure that you cook the meat completely. So pre-cooked meat you can throw in 5 or 10 minutes before the soup is done, but if you're using raw meat, you want to put it in your soup early on in the cooking so that you make sure it's thoroughly cooked. So we'll throw that in there. And then the final step is vegetables. I do not recommend canned vegetables with one exception, and that is canned tomatoes. Canned tomatoes are great. Um, they will give your soup kind of a tomatoey base without being really overpowering. Um, so canned tomatoes are great to work with, but as far as other canned vegetables, they've already been cooked when they get canned. So if you take those and you put them in your soup, they're going to be really mushy and flavorless. So I would recommend going with raw vegetables, or if you were going to be save some time, frozen vegetables are great. They're pre-cut. You don't have to get the school cafeteria blend that I have right here. There's lots of different kinds of vegetable blends that they have in the freezer department. There's Italian blends, there's the California mixture, there's the stir-fry blend. So depending on what kind of soup you're making, you can just pick a different bag of frozen vegetables. The only downside of using those blends is that sometimes the vegetables in them are kind of big. And ordinarily you want to cut your vegetables up so that they would fit in a soup spoon, because soup is not something that you should be cutting up with a fork and a knife in order to get it into your mouth. But that aside, those frozen vegetable mixtures are great for making a quick and easy soup. The other option too is, of course, to use raw vegetables. And so you want to put the vegetables in your soup as you cook it according to how long the vegetables would take to cook by themselves. So a really dense, heavy vegetable like a carrot or a squash or a turnip or rutabaga, those things need to go in early because they're going to take some time to cook so that they are soft when you eat them. So, potatoes would go in earlier than something like corn or peppers. Save the really delicate vegetables like asparagus tips, zucchini, or summer squash, or yellow squash is another name for it. Save those to put in your soup about 5 or 10 minutes before you pull it off the heat, because these are going to cook really quickly and you don't want to overcook them. So again, cut your vegetables up into a size that would fit nicely in a spoon, and then just add them into your soup about how long it would take for them to cook regularly if you were cooking them just on their own. So say 15-20 minutes for carrots, 15 potatoes. You can throw in something like celery or bok choy. You can throw that in earlier if you don't mind having it really soft, or you can save it for a little bit later if you'd like it to have some firm crunch to it. Broccoli stems are going to take longer than broccoli florets. So you just need to think about the vegetables that you're putting in and add them in as you go, which is another advantage to those frozen vegetables, is that they all take just about the same amount of time to cook up. So you just add all your ingredients in, and as far as seasoning your soup, that's something that you can do depending on what kind of flavor you want to give it. So a mixture of marjoram and thyme is kind of a real neutral flavor that you can use with pretty much any soup. If you want to make more of an Italian, you can throw in some oregano and basil. You can put in some pasta, some kidney beans, some canned tomatoes, and make more of a minestrone flavor. If you have a blend of stir-fry frozen vegetables, you can throw that in with some bok choy and a little splash of soy sauce. That'll give you more of an Asian flavored soup. So basically you can just kind of play around with it. The big thing is you want to start with that really good homemade stock, and you want to start with that mirepoix so that you get a really good hearty flavor base for your soup, and then you can just kind of add in depending on what ingredients you have on hand or what ingredients you feel like cooking with. And so this is a really good way to play around and explore your kitchen. All right, thank you.